This episode of msdos Games has an interesting selection of titles, so let's see what we've got to check out this time. Invasion of the Mutant Space Bats of Doom is not only the single most epically named game I can recall, but also a really fun shareware shoot 'em up. And it's the fact that it was released as shareware that contributes to its obscurity. While the story as in most shoot 'em ups is as cliché as you can imagine it to be, the opening introduction is full of fun and quirky B-movie tropes of the 60s. Graphically and sound-wise, Invasion is nothing special. Really, everything is just right, but doesn't stand out in any way from hundreds of other shooters. But in terms of gameplay, it's just pure fun. It's hard to say why, as it doesn't do anything that others haven't done before, but it all just fits well together and presents itself as a complete and enjoyable package. And in that it kinda reminds me of Deluxe Galaga on Amiga, which also did not feature flashy presentation, but more than made up for it with gameplay. Deluxe Galaga is obviously better than Invasion, but it's hardly a surprise as there's perhaps one or two games that I'd consider to be equal or superior to it. Coming back to Invasion though, it is composed out of 21 levels in the shareware version and 65 in the registered one, which in both cases is pretty solid as there were multiple other games released back in the day that sold as full-fledged releases and had less stages than Invasion has in its shareware outing. It features a simple but easy to understand upgrade system based on picking up gems that fall from defeated enemies. Green gems increase the shot speed, white increase the damage, red improve your rate of fire, blue slow the game down for a little while, and if you collect 6 purple gems, you're granted an additional life. Oh, and it goes without saying that all the enemies you'll face are some form of the titular space bats. If there's one thing that you should take out of everything I just said, is that if you're at all into the genre, Invasion is definitely a hidden gem that you ought to track down and add to your collection. Now this is going to be a tough one, as Manhunter New York is not the easiest of games to describe while also giving it justice. But if I was to simplify it to the very basic genre it represents, I'd say it's Sierra's point-and-click adventure with some action segments here and there. The game is set in post-apocalyptic New York in the far-off future of 2004. Yep, when it released in 1988, 2004 seemed like a lifetime away. Anyway, 2 years prior, in 2002, the Earth has been enslaved by the alien force known only as the Orbs, who look suspiciously similar to simplified beholders from AD&D. They've implanted all humans with tracking devices, forced them to wear nondescript boring brown bag-looking robes, and forbid them from speaking. I know a person or two who could have benefited from such order, but that's beside the point. You play as the titular Manhunter, one of the chosen few to be the judge, jury and executioner working for the Orbs, and you're sent to track down humans who are suspected to be forming an underground resistance. As the game progresses, you uncover that the Orbs are actually harvesting human organs and treat the planet as quote-unquote gigantic farm, upon which they cultivate humans as food that they later on consume. And it is when you realize what's what and switch sides to overthrow the evil rulers. Manhunter is definitely not a game for kids. Dark and often gory visuals contrast with Sierra's other colorful fairy tale-like adventure games, and the use of first-person perspective and point-and-click interface adds a lot to the gritty post-apocalyptic atmosphere. Especially that the game takes place in New York and you get to visit many true-to-life locations and landmarks. Manhunter is something all fans of adventure games should at least try to approach and see if they like it, cause if they do, they're in for a unique adventure and story unlike many. Jill of the Jungle is the first title in trilogy of shareware action platformer games designed by legendary Tim Sweeney and released by Epic Mega Games. While Jill never gained acclaim and popularity as huge as his later Unreal shooters did, it's still a pretty fun and well-executed game. It features 14 levels and their typical platforming fare where you control titular eponymous Jill, fighting various monsters such as snails, frogs, piranhas and giant ants to name a few, and solving simple puzzles to advance further. You're armed with a knife and spinning blade, and they're your best friends in those monster-filled lands. Some levels may feature parts that will require Jill to change forms, and she can transform into a fish that can swim in the water, bird that can fly, or a frog that has a considerably higher jump than Jill does. All of these can shoot same way our heroine does. You'll obviously need to collect keys to advance and avoid environmental dangers like spikes or even water if you're not in your fish form. Jill was a transitional game across Gen 1, I'd risk saying, as it came out supporting both VGA graphics and Sound Blaster sound, and in the same time it could be run using EGA and even lowly and ugly CGA for much reduced but still playable experience. The only thing I could really pick on would be that aside from Sound Blaster, it only supported PC speaker, so you could either experience the absolute top quality sound and music available on PC, or absolute worse, with literally no options in between. Weird choice, but I suppose that there had to be a reason for it. We will never know. All in all, Jill of the Jungle is a very competent and decently fun game that all fans of the platforming genre should at the very least try, as it may surprise them with its playability, even if it was never as popular as it could have been if it was released as a standalone title with a proper publisher backing and ads. Vette is a racing/simulation game putting Chevrolet Corvette at the forefront and taking place on streets of San Francisco. In fact, in game's 3D flat-shaded presentation, a big part of the city is recreated within the confines of the game as close as it was possible given the tech available at the time, and many of the famous San Francisco landmarks are represented quite faithfully. Golden Gate Bridge, Bay Bridge and Fisherman's Wharf to name a few. 4 Corvettes are available to choose from: stock 89 Corvette, ZR1, Calway's Twin Turbo and Sledgehammer. And opponents drive 4 European cars: Porsche 928, Lamborghini Countach, Ferrari F40 and Testarossa. Another thing that comes in force in Vette is the number of courses to race on. But if you're not in the mood for a challenge, you can just tour the city in aptly named Tour mode. While you race, since it's within the confines of the city, you may be pulled over by cops, and unless you've hit or run over a pedestrian, it's not a game over. You can pick from a whole list of excuses to convince the cop to let you go. And believe it or not, but they sometimes work. It's worth keeping in mind that your car is susceptible to damage, which in turn influences its engine power and handling. You can have it fixed at one of the many gas stations in the city though. I should really question why it's the gas stations that offer repair services, but I blame it all on game's logic that allows for adding anything to the game that designers' imagination can spawn. At the time of its release, Vette was praised by the few gaming mags that covered it for its unprecedented realism of both driving and dashboards of all 4 Corvettes. It's not a groundbreaking game or best racer out there, so don't approach it with this mindset and too high expectations, but it's decent, and unlike anything else racer, that's design-wise closer to likes of Stunt Car Racer and Stunts rather than Need for Speed and Lotus series of games. God of Thunder is a tough nut to crack. Not because he's a god, though that may be a contributing factor too, but because it's a mishmash. On one hand, it looks and sounds very simple for the time, and there isn't anything presentation-wise worth remembering. But on another, it features pretty good story and stellar gameplay loop, mixing various genres in unforgettable experience. Odin, the highest of Norse gods, goes into deep slumber periodically. During one of those so-called Odin sleeps, god of mischief Loki stole Odin's favorite land, Midgard, and populated it with various unimaginable monstrosities. You, as Odin's true son Thor, with use of your magic hammer have to travel to Midgard, reclaim it for your father and face Loki and his forces. The game is a mixture of adventuring with some simple role-playing, not unlike original Zelda on NES, with a touch of platforming. Those platforming sections are viewed from a side perspective, while most of the game is in bird's eye view. On your adventure you'll face many monsters, fighting them in action combat using your hammer or lightning attacks. But most of all, you'll be solving puzzles. And these can range from very small and easy ones, to those that take up a whole screen and can prove challenging even for seasoned Logic Games fans. Still, in its heart, God of Thunder is an action-adventure, so if you like those kinds of games and can overlook a bit underwhelming presentation, there's a lot of fun to be had here. Hugo's House of Horrors is the first title in Hugo's own trilogy, and like most games we spoke about today, a shareware title. It only goes to prove that while easier for the designer to publish without the need for a big publisher, shareware games had much smaller reach, and eventually many of them fell into obscurity. Oh, and it may be obvious by now since you're watching the video, but Hugo is not the Hugo you thought of. Or at least it wasn't the Hugo I thought of when I heard about this game. I imagined that horned trolley thingy that was often featured on TV in the late 80s and early 90s, in shows where you could dial in with your digital phone and play to win games. At least that's what we had here. Still, it's not the one, so let's let him rest in his CRT TV-shaped coffin in peace. This Hugo is an adventure game controlled with a mixture of arrow-based movement and typed-in commands. So a text parser. Oh man, how I hate those. Anyway, your sweetheart Penelope has disappeared in mysterious circumstances after visiting a seemingly haunted house on her babysitting job. So in order to find and rescue her, you need to head to the haunted mansion and explore it, all areas around and beneath it, and solve various puzzles. And those range quite considerably from inventory puzzles that require smart use of items you find around the house, through ones that are agility based and see you navigating your character carefully around a certain area, to those that will straight up test your knowledge. How does Hugo's House of Horrors compare to games in the genre by Sierra and even more so LucasArts? Well, while it's not a bad game in no sense of the word, there's no comparison really. It's not that they're in different quality leagues, they don't even play the same sport. The difference is monumental and there's no mistaking which of the titles is shareware if you compare the three. Interestingly enough, if you purchase full version of Hugo, you not only get 2 other episodes completing the trilogy, but also an automatic solver that plays the whole game like a movie. So there's that. Omnicron Conspiracy is a zany, light-hearted adventure set in a far-off future. You're Ace Powers, a star police captain, and you're assigned the task of investigating an intergalactic drug ring. You learn quickly that the previous cop assigned to the task has gone missing, so you must pick up the trail and solve the case yourself. I realize that nothing of what I just said sounds fun, but believe me, Omnicron Conspiracy is full of offbeat moments, more or less hidden jokes, and humorous interactions. While it's not point and click per se, as the controls are keyboard based, it's not far off. There's no commands to type in anywhere, and when you're in vicinity of an object or character you'd like to interact with, press enter and a list of available actions will appear. They're context-based, so there's hardly ever going to be more than 3 at a time. Your inventory can hold up to 6 items at once, and they must be used to either solve puzzles that will help you advance in your investigation, or more often than not, for comedic purposes. It's worth noting that one of the items in the game is a laser gun that can be set to stun or kill, and it should never leave one of your inventory slots as it will come in handy quite often. While the gameplay itself feels rather linear, finding clues and following the investigation is fun, even if at times feeling a bit slow. Since there's around 250 locations to visit, literally hundreds of characters to talk to and interact with, and the game overall is huge and filled with humor to the brim, if you like adventure games, especially those with addictive properties, you're gonna love Omnicron Conspiracy. Vinyl Goddess from Mars seems to have a lot of similarities with earlier title we spoke about, Jill of the Jungle. And not for no reason, as it was originally planned as a sequel to it. Mid-development, however, Epic Mega Games dropped it, opting for just Jackrabbit instead. Vinyl Goddess was picked by another developer and publisher and completed, eventually releasing in 1995. Story-wise, our leather-wearing over-sexualized heroine is on her way to an intergalactic B-movie convention when a sudden meteor shower throws her spaceship off its original course. She crash lands on an unknown mysterious planet on which you take control of our heroine and must help her find and repair her ship, gather all her belongings and get to the convention in time. I know, story leaves a bit to be desired, but when did the story in a platformer ever was important? Oh, you're right, Flashback and Prince of Persia are great examples of when. But let's just get back to the agenda and leave the plot aside. The game is a side-scrolling platformer, and as you might have already guessed, the first episode is released as shareware and the remaining 2 are unlocked upon registration/purchase. The game offers quite a few weapons to choose from, with daggers, shurikens, fireballs and flaming oil being among them. Enemies are quite varied too and much more difficult than in Jail. And in general, Vinyl Goddess feels like a much more demanding Jail with a better presentation. Is it a better game overall? Not necessarily, but it's not inherently a bad one. Despite the title, in Crime Fighter you don't take a role of a police officer or a vigilante. Quite the opposite in fact. You're a rookie gangster aiming to become a big deal. The game is played for points and money, and it's these 2 factors that decide upon your position within the underworld hierarchy. And for all intents and purposes, Crime Fighter is a board game played in turns for up to 4 players. The board is divided into sections, each of representing important to the gameplay locations like bank or police station to name a few, and your main task is to commit as many crimes as possible to climb the underworld ladder. You obviously should start small with burglaries and theft, and eventually will progress to more demanding bank and train raids. All the actions that you can take are resolved using different minigames, which at first seem like a breath of fresh air, but quickly become repeatable and underwhelming. Crime Fighter is a fun game if played with friends once every Halley Comet's passing, so not very often, but from time to time, when you're in a mood for a classic unlike most, it's a good choice to fire up and get lost in a criminal underground. The cover of Big Red Racing says it all. It's adrenaline-fueled, action-packed, cool Mario Kart-like racer with a touch of off-road and bits and pieces borrowed from another racing games. It's the Sonic the Hedgehog of racers. It's cool, rad, hype and whatever else you would have called it back in the day. But most of all, it's actually really fun. It features 24 entirely unique tracks, each of having distinctive look and feel, and each of offering 2 vehicles to choose from. There's many more obviously, and they can be really crazy and unexpected, like spaceships, snowmobiles, jeeps, helicopters and hovercrafts to name a few, but there is always only 2 to pick between for each race. All of them allow for in-cockpit view or a wide selection of behind-the-vehicle cameras, so that everyone can play the game the way they like best. And while the vehicles themselves don't look especially great in these early 3D titles, and trucks could use a bit more variety in terms of what's around them in the background, the game itself is a riot. And you're not gonna get bored or feel as if there was something missing or the game lacked content. Big Red Racing is hella fun and an excellent example of a game that grew old well and is as playable today as it was over 25 years ago. Oh, and obviously Big Red Racing features a whole plethora of multiplayer options over modem and network too, but where it shines is its split screen mode where you can enjoy it with or against a friend same way you would have Mario Kart. But faster, crazier, and most of all in a very varied form, where each next track plays entirely different than the one before. Big Red Racing is one of those games that would have really benefited from a modern reimagination with polished presentation and sounds and release on Xbox Game Pass for instance, where it would have quickly become a hit. So, how does today's 10 look like? They're all pretty good, aren't they? Did you know any of these? Or perhaps they're all entirely new to you? Let me know in the comments below. I'm already drafting a list of titles for the next one, so if you liked this video, make sure to hit like and subscribe. It helps a lot. Around 70% of you are still not subscribed, and there's no way of knowing if YouTube will decide to recommend the next video to you, other than by subscribing, that is. If you want to be 100% sure that it does, however, hit the bell button too. Then when the video's out, you'll get a friendly notification letting you know about it. If you'd like to support this channel, Patreon subscriptions and YouTube memberships are a great help and will go towards replacing my editing PC eventually. You also get access to all new videos a day early and will be able to follow all the updates on what's coming to and changing on the channel. If you can't or don't want to do that though, likes and subscribes are awesome too. Most of all, however, I would like to take a second here and thank all the YouTube Let's Plays and playthrough creators, from whose videos short bits were taken for this one as a video background to my commentary. They're amazing, and thanks to their efforts, retro community can prevail for years longer and in better form than it could have otherwise. So thank you. For me though, this is all, so have a good one and I'll see you next time. Peace.